I, 29F, have been with my husband, 30M, for 7 years, married for 4. I've never had reason to suspect he was unfaithful to me or even remotely dissatisfied with our marriage. He likes to joke that we're still living the honeymoon phase nearly 5 years and 2 kids in. I wouldn't have questioned that, or him, were it not for a surprise I found in his car last month. When buckling our daughter into her car seat, I noticed something slotted between the cushions. I pulled it out and saw that it was a tampon. This wouldn't have been so unusual had I not had an IUD that has stopped my period for the past year, and I didn't even recognize the wrapper style. I brought it to my husband's attention, and he didn't seem to understand what it was, let alone why I was holding it, until I told him where I'd found it and why I was almost certain it wasn't mine. He shrugged and said it probably belonged to his coworker, Fiona. It's not uncommon for my husband to carpool to lunch with his coworkers, and we're both fairly close to Fiona and her husband, so I figured it was entirely possible the tampon had slipped out of her purse whenever he had driven with them or offered her a ride. No big deal. I put it out of my mind until we had dinner with Fiona and her husband a couple weeks later. I had sincerely wanted to believe my husband. I just couldn't get over the way it had been tucked in the seat and how my husband had seemed not to have any regard for it whatsoever. Maybe playing dumb. I don't know. I did something that I now feel kind of crazy for doing. I faked an emergency and asked Fiona if she had any tampons while we were out together. She handed me one almost identical to the tampon I'd found in our backseat, and I breathed a sigh of relief. So the tampon, there was probably the same tampon here, and in all likelihood, there was an innocent explanation as to why it had been left in the backseat in the first place. I thought I'd seen the last of the out-of-place feminine hygiene products until I found another tampon this morning. This time in my sock drawer. I feel physically ill at the thought of my husband having an affair and even more nauseated at the thought that the woman might have left these tampons out for me to find. If it was my husband's coworker, why would she give herself away by offering me one the other night? In any other situation I would want to talk to my husband about this, but I feel too sick, and embarrassed, to approach him with what I've found. What should I do? Comments. I've had a period 30 years and never put a tampon in a sock drawer. Trust your gut and get cameras. Neither have I. I've considered so many explanations for the tampons that wouldn't implicate my husband, but none of them make sense, really. I'm terrified to set up a camera if it means confirming what I suspect right now. Has Fiona been over to your house and had time to plant the tampon? She's been to our house many times and vice versa. To my knowledge, she wasn't over any time in the past week, so if she planted that second tampon, she had to have found a window of time when I wasn't home. Any time she and her husband visit, we all stay downstairs, and you'd have to go really out of your way to make it to our bedroom, i.e., around our dogs, over the safety gate, past the other bedrooms. Not saying it's impossible, but definitely tricky to do on a quick bathroom break, I would guess. How old are your kids? Could they have found a tampon and put it in a random place? 2 and almost 4. Both have a mischievous streak, so I didn't want to rule out the possibility of one of them moving stuff around, but I can't imagine how they'd get their hands on one, possibly 2 random tampons that I never bought. Update 1, September 20th, 2023. Contemplating every possible source of 2 tampons has been my personal hell for the past few weeks, but I wanted to share an update. Shortly after posting on here, I told my sister what happened. The tampon in the back seat and the sock drawer, my husband's cluelessness, the tampon from Fiona, and all the things I suspected but didn't want to believe. We compared tampons, save for the backseat one I had already discarded, and they were a match, just in different absorbencies. I hadn't left either in a place where my husband or daughters would have found them and moved them around. My daughters didn't know what they were or where they had come from. My sister was convinced it was Fiona, either fucking my husband, fucking with me, or both. Direct confrontation of either party still seemed like a bad idea, so she suggested inviting Fiona and her husband over for our Labor Day barbecue. Unfortunately, they already had plans. My sister and I agreed that it was too soon for cameras without any other evidence, so it was just a waiting game from there. Watching my husband for any changed behavior, there was none, our house for any misplaced/foreign items, there were none, and even the girls for any new friends they might have met. My sister's husband was adamant on this last point, and partly why he was inclined to believe that the tampons were harmless. If anything had been happening in or around our home, he said, it would be nearly impossible to keep it from me and the girls, since my husband was the one taking them to and from daycare and most other activities during the week. I felt a good bit of consolation in that. It wasn't until my younger daughter, 2 years/0, came down with something last week that I felt any differently. I wanted to be the one home taking care of her, but my husband insisted that I stay at work while he stayed home with her. I was okay with that. My sister and her husband figured it was a good sign that he would take the time off at a moment's notice, and at that point, we were all already beginning to put the tampon fiasco behind us. By the 3rd or 4th day, I was just happy to see a near-healthy child and a husband who was helping see her through it. Toward the end of that week, though, I came home to something strange. The toddler that I'd left that morning in an old PJ set was now dressed in a onesie I'd never seen before, with a tiny clip in her hair. I can't say I have the sharpest memory, but I have a pretty good sense of what my kids wear on a day-to-day basis, and particularly what kinds of clothes they wear. I'd sworn off the full-length sleep suits with snaps across the front long before we'd ever had our second. The long snaps are just a pain in the ass and a no-go for efficient diaper changes. Emo. It's just not something I would dress her in, and my husband knows as much. He doesn't plan for, or buy, the girls' clothes, and he certainly doesn't accessorize them, so I was bewildered. And kind of floored at the thought of someone around our sick child without my knowledge. I didn't think twice, and I went straight to my husband to ask if anyone had been over to see him or the girls. He seemed confused, like before, and asked me why I would think that. It had just been him and the kids all day. I asked him again, if someone had so much as stopped by to say hello, and he denied it. He told me to calm down. I might have lashed out and come forward with the accusations right then and there, but our older daughter was in the room, and she sensed something was up. In a calmer voice, I asked him a third time if anyone had been around our children, and my husband swore that the girls hadn't been around anyone but him. He also denied buying new clothes or doing anyone's hair. With our daughter in the room and my emotions all over the place, I decided to leave it. I couldn't make sense of it then, and it hardly seems clearer now, after I've driven myself half crazy with explanations that aren't adding up. Comments. To answer a couple questions. My 2-year/0 can only string together a couple words at a time, and when I ask her about her time with daddy or her clothes/bow, she answers based on the cues I give her. For example, who gave you that pretty bow? And she repeats pretty bow back to me, or mama/daddy over and over. My older daughter, almost 4, was at daycare that morning, and she can't recall anything different from that day. Doesn't remember the PJ change or the hair clip, so my guess is she was changed sometime that morning, but I'm not totally sure. I have a 45 minutes commute to work, so stopping by for lunch isn't really feasible. My sister has been kind enough to leave work and drive past a few times here and there, and she hasn't seen anything out of the ordinary. We have a Ring camera at the front door, and I've got the app on my phone with notifs on. Nothing there yet. If anyone has recommendations for more discreet surveillance, I'd be open to it. I'm just the least tech-savvy person and worry another camera will be easy to detect lol. Edit. And yes, we get our carbon monoxide detectors tested regularly. Is it possible one of the hair clips came from daycare? I could see the hair clip being a possibility, but less likely on the onesie. My younger daughter hadn't been to daycare in days, and if either of them had returned with something like that before I would have noticed, especially since it was the kind of onesie I hate with a passion lol. People comment that they can't wait to find out the ending to this saga. My money's on the Hollywood horror ending. Hopefully dreamed up the dogs too so I can finally stop picking up their imaginary shits and whatnot. Update 2, October 6, 2023. After nearly losing my mind over a hair clip and a onesie, I realized I wasn't getting anywhere with the accusations and half-baked guesswork. I'd gotten so absorbed in the paranoia and misery of my situation that I wasn't sleeping, eating, or caring for my kids the way I should have been. And I wasn't getting any answers. So I decided to pull the trigger on the hidden cameras and have them shipped to my sister's house, with my bill agreeing to help with the install/setup over at mine. Before the cameras were ever delivered, though, I got my long-awaited confirmation last week. A Ring notification had alerted me to motion at the front door while I was at work. Half expecting to see a delivery person, pet, or lawn care salesman for the 15th time, you can imagine my surprise when I saw a clip of a young woman leading my daughter into the house hand in hand, with my husband and other daughter close behind them. The girls were supposed to be in daycare and my husband at work. The woman, as far as I knew, was living 2 states away with a court order keeping her there. I immediately called my husband to ask him what the fuck this woman was doing in our house. He didn't answer, so I texted it to him. Even in his stupidity, he probably realized he had messed up by going through the front door, knew I had gotten the Ring notification, and wanted to delay the inevitable. By the 5th or 6th subsequent call, though, he did pick up. The woman on the camera was my husband's sister. As I would come to find out later, she was the likely source of both tampons, the onesie, and the bow. She is also a registered sex offender and a recovering addict, who spent the better part of her adolescence and young adulthood coercing the silence of another one of my husband's family members after she had molested them. I hadn't seen or heard from her in years, and from the way my husband talked about her, I didn't expect I ever would. But here she was, in our house, with our children. Suffice to say I was livid. It wasn't an affair at all and still, somehow, infinitely more disgusting knowing who it was and why all of this had been happening. Apparently my Sil, fresh off another stint in rehab, had wanted to reconnect and make amends with people she'd hurt, and my husband was high on that list. My husband didn't want me to know or, worse, try and keep her family, our children, away from her, so they'd been meeting in secret, often at our house when I was at work. They would enter through the garage, in my husband's car, so the Ring camera at the front door wouldn't tip me off. She spent the night on a weekend I had been on a business trip and slept in our bed. She babysat our girls on a night my husband told me he had dropped them off at his parents'. She bought the girls' clothes and dressed my youngest in the onesie and bow that my husband had promised on his life I had dressed her in myself. My husband swore this was all in my head. The tampons, the onesie, the bow, and all the rest. He was perfectly content to watch me agonize for weeks over a woman he insisted didn't exist. Shrugging off each progressively more unsettling discovery like it was news to him and telling me I was being irrational. He insinuated that I was experiencing postpartum depression, 2 years after I'd given birth. 4 years after I'd told him that one of my biggest fears for motherhood was to suffer PPD like my mother had with me, to not be fully present for our babies and be left with a world of guilt and regret as they grew older. He told me I wasn't sleeping enough, that I missed the girls too much, that I needed to take a step back and reevaluate the state of my mental health. I gave him the benefit of the doubt because he was my husband, and because no other version of events made sense. Now, after a month of this mindfuck, I have nothing to show for my trust but this pathetic situation. And a lot of anger. Comment. Call the cops and a lawyer. Already on it. Believe me, we're going scorched earth with this motherfucker. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Best friend was outed as trans by another friend. I defended him and it led to someone losing their job. I will try to make this as short as possible but have to explain a lot too, so here we go. My BFF Sam and I have been besties for over a decade and thus I have known him pre-transition. He didn't live in the city I did until about 4 years ago, but when he moved I helped him get a job, make friends, etc. Some think he is my BF of a year. The truth is a bit more complicated. 2 years ago I got out of a very abusive relationship, and when I was on the market I got swarmed a bit with being asked out by casual acquaintances. Sam posed as my BF to get an especially pushy guy away from me at a bar we are both regulars at, and we kept it going because, 1, he gets pressured by his coworkers and mentors that he is a catch and should date but he hasn't felt ready, and 2, so I can have some peace as I focus on my therapy and healing from my past relationship. Note, our best friend group knows that Sam and I are not really a couple. Another guy like that was Mal, another friend in the group. He asked me out around 4 or 5 months after my breakup. I explained that I needed at least a 2 years break from dating, focus on continued therapy, working through my trauma, and take time to focus on me and what I want and all that jazz. He said he understood, and not even 2 months after that we found out that Mal and another of the group were a couple and now they are engaged. Mal has been a friend for maybe 3 or 4 years. We were never especially close and I always just viewed him as a member of our 6-person friend group. We only ever hang out with the group and never one-on-one. I guess I am saying this all to say Mal's sort of the Flash to my Batman. We get on well when with the other super friends, but don't expect too many duo team-ups. At a party at my place where many of our co-workers and bosses were present, Sam's boss points to me and Sam saying something about how he can't wait for us to settle down and have kids, saying, "Come on, Sam, what are you waiting for, man?" And Mal snorts and clearly muttered "man" very incredulously and said, "Yeah, if you want to call Samantha man, that's on you." At first our friends thought it was a supernatural joke, as a lot of us love the show. A character is named Sam and another character calls him Samantha to emasculate him. But then Mal declared that Sam is actually a woman and provided proof by way of pictures of Sam pre-transition. Mal then made comments about me that I must be a lesbian, I am bi, and that Sam and us must be actually a real couple and sleeping together. He was kicked out of my home. Now being outed as a trans man at work caused a lot of drama, and Sam was depressed and has stayed with me for a better part of a month. He didn't eat much and lost a ton of weight, almost never left the house, especially not alone unless to go to work, and has been saying very self-loathing morbid things here and there. I've been really worried about him. I won't lie, I was furious. I'm not an overly confrontational person and am a recovering doormat, but this made my whole being boil. I have been focused on being attentive to Sam and trying to channel my angst, anger, and are into productive things. But the friend group is a bit complicated, as most think Mal is a dick for outing Sam, but some also think Sam is a jerk for not being honest with them. So here's where I'm probably in awe. I texted Mal and Mal's fiancée, our mutual friend in the group, Michaela, and said that Mal isn't welcome at my home for the foreseeable future, and after that is really up to Mal's actions and Sam's ability to forgive such things. But she defended him, saying that Mal was just upset that Sam hid that he was really a trans all along and now felt uncomfortable, and that Sam should have said something at least to our group before joining outings like swimming, in which the men change in the men's locker room and the women in the women's, etc. She says she feels hurt that another woman saw Mal undressing, and it devolved from there. In this group we all work in the same type of industry but in different departments essentially, and mostly different companies. We're always a bit adjacent to one another in career though. That is a lot to say. Everyone here usually makes at least okay money and we all know each other's coworkers and the like. I got a call from another friend, Peter, who is hiring right now for a senior position, and he said Mal had applied for it. Peter is essentially already above Mal, as Peter is the boss of Mal's current boss. Mal had put me down as a reference, which in our group we do frequently when applying. Peter was content to use the same letter of recommendation I had sent before when Mal applied for his current position, but wanted to cover all the bases, and I told him that I no longer see Mal as an ethical, responsible, or suitable candidate in our field, given that he seems to be bigoted towards queer folk, and I, as a queen woman, no longer trust him and would not want to work with him if I had any say in it. Peter was quiet and asked what caused the change, and I didn't tell him. Just saying recent events have caused me to reassess. This was perhaps a week ago. Well, a few hours ago, Michaela came over my place and was pissed. She told me that Mal is getting grilled at work, that HR combed his social media and has brought up posts of his and are now considering disciplinary actions with him, and she says she knows it's me. She says Sam literally doesn't have the balls to call the company, so it had to be me. She seemed to think I had a crush on Mal and he turned me down, and thus I was jealous of her and trying to ruin their lives. She called me desperate and degenerate. I snapped and asked her to leave. She then texts me the same argument she had before, and I reiterated over text that I don't want to speak to her or Mal ever again. I screenshotted all of this and sent it to our friend group chat and left the chat. Now I'm getting messaged from almost everyone asking what's happening, but also that I'm going nuclear and went too far. I texted Sam and Sam says he is not ready to deal with the friend group right now, so I can do what I think is right and he will regroup and come back to it when he has the bandwidth. Did I go too far in involving everyone? Am I the off for going nuclear? Update, August 10, 2024. A little under a month ago, I posted about an ongoing issue. My best friend Sam was outed as a trans man publicly by our former mutual friend Mal. Mal applied for a job before all this and used us as references, and I said that I don't find him to be trustworthy nor would I want to work with him. Another friend of ours, frankly forgot the fake name I gave her, I think it's Michaela, basically blamed me for Mal, then getting a lot of heat at work. The update is that they combed his social media and uncovered quite a few unsavory posts. I never knew this, but he's hugely vocally transphobic and homophobic. So, instead of a promotion, he got fired. I had already left the friend group chat by this point, and I had blocked both Mal and Michaela. I was focused on Sam, who was going through the deepest depression I have ever seen him go through, and we've known each other a good chunk of our lives. I helped him find emergency therapy, and he stayed with me for almost a month because he was concerned he would fall back into self-harm. He drank heavily and was spiraling hard, and thankfully, he's now on the other side of it all, but it was terrifying. Neither of us got a lot of sleep during this time, and I called in a bunch at work out of exhaustion, concern, or plain numbness. I caught up with a friend from our old group named DF30S at a place we all frequent a few couple ago, and she told me Mal has told everyone that Sam is a woman Earl and she cosplays as a man. My blood boiled, but then I heard about him being fired and hey, I'm human and fuck him. He hurt my best friend, so in my book he got off really easy. But of course about a week after that I ran into him and Michaela at our local, redacted. I am a creature of habit, that's the store in my community, and I always get groceries on Sundays, walk across to the Starbucks next door, have a tea and doom scroll for a bit before biking back home. I saw them, they saw me, I avoided them, got my shit and walked to Starbucks. Mal I guess had stuff to get off his chest, so he ended up there too. He approached me as I waited for my coffee and started on how I stabbed him in the back and stooped low to do so, and now he has no job. He said he might have to move because of the rumors I spread about him and that he is being ostracized. He went on and on bellyaching, and this is Starbucks in a pretty liberal freaking city, so I just loudly said, well, that's what happens to transphobes, Mal. No one likes a bigot. Go away. And while he started in on whatever the fuck he was saying, I couldn't hear over the bigoted fuckery. This big dude walks over and tells him to fuck off. Mal is now telling this guy off, and they are tennis balling insults until Mal aggressively points a finger in my face to hurl a racist slur. I know. Like, dude, at least use a shovel to dig yourself deeper. Christ. Leave enough hate for the other half smoked wet lettuce joint losers out there. Turns out being a racist dickwad trumps being a homophobic twat in this beanery, because that's when people started shouting, and eventually he was just drowned out, surrounded by people who seemed to be in need of pitchforks, some holding their phones up to record. I was a forgotten prop and just sort of drifted back as he was trying to take on a sea of people from our city where we don't take kindly to this bullshit. He left and later sent Sam a paragraphs long message about how he, Sam, ruined his, Mal's, life because he is masquerading as a man, and if he were a real man, he would face him himself rather than have his bitch, me, sicked on him. He then went on to say that if he dies from all this stress of being so hated that he is now getting trolled on social media, receiving death threats and the like, it will be Sam's fault. Mal said he should sue Sam and me both for defamation and lost wages since we started this witch hunt. Today I heard he moved. Sans Michaela. She's still here. Dunno about her situation right now and don't rightly care. I do know she met with Sam and apologized to him, and he did accept it, but was clear that their friendship is non-existent now. She offered to go to Pride, which is locally happening, and Sam said she is welcome to, but not with him. She asked him to please hand me a note she wrote for me, which he did, but I haven't read it and probably won't. As far as I am concerned, she doesn't exist anymore. So that's it. I had forgotten about my post until Sam asked me whatever happened about it, and I was like, ooh yeah, and I personally as a lurker hate unresolved stories, so here it is. Here's your bow. That's a wrap.